Well, welcome to another video. I'm driving again. I am in the great state of Missouri. Well, actually, I just crossed the state line. I think I'm in Iowa now. But as you can see, this is broad daylight. It's really dark out. I don't know what I'm coming into, but I'm falling asleep, so I thought I'd make a video. I was going to talk about a video I saw the other night after I posted my video by Toby, and he's The Gypsy's Kiss is his channel. And he's one of those searchers that apparently, and I'm still new to this, so I'm still learning names, but he's done a lot of research. He's looked at all the interviews and everything. And the video is titled, and I don't know if it was a recent one or not, because I'm in my hotel room just flipping through YouTube videos. But the video was entitled Forrest Fenn Wrote His Poem for One Person. That was the name of the video. And he went through a couple interviews, and he came to the conclusion that Forrest Fenn wrote the poem for one person, and that was Forrest Fenn. And so Forrest understands the poem because he wrote it for himself. And I know that he spent 15 years on it, and he looked up every noun and all this stuff, but he did write it for himself. And that's exactly the point I made in the video I posted, like just hours before that. I'm like, yeah, Forrest Fenn, he gathers treasure, and he has a lot of treasure, and but as an armchair treasure hunter, I don't know if he understands the mindset of someone looking for something that they don't know about. And I was going to talk about my book a little bit. Man, we're coming into a thick fog. It's hard to believe it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's getting so dark out. But anyway, I was going to talk about my book a little bit, and then bring it back around, because there's a point in my book where it kind of plays back into the Forrest Fenn. And a lot of people have asked me, where did I come up with this idea of having a big hill full of doors, and these doors were all storage devices, and all the magic involved, and all the creatures, and everything involved with it. And it started with cemeteries. Now, I probably talked about this before, but I have visited hundreds and hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands of cemeteries. I know that I had a great hard drive crash when I was in Denver, and I lost about 10,000 pictures. And that killed me. 10,000. Imagine losing 10,000 pictures. And I lost all the pictures of my tour of the United States and everything. But I have a folder called Cemetery Pictures, and that folder alone has 165,000 pictures in it. So that's cemetery pictures. That's how much I visit cemeteries. And I love looking at the stones. I love seeing the stories. There's lots of stories in cemeteries. I was just in one yesterday, and I'm looking at this woman, and I always do math. I'm getting pretty quick with doing the math in my head. I'm like, okay, she was 23 years old when she died. She died on like February 20th, 1928 or something like that. And then right next to her is like baby daughter of, and it was the same name, February 20th, 1928. I'm like, oh, that's sad. This 23-year-old woman died during childbirth, and there she is buried, and there's her child. And then the husband's grave is right there, and then next to that is wife of the same guy. So he remarried at some point, and he's buried in between his two wives. And it's just, so these little stories like that. And there's always, I can always spot like when the Spanish flu went through, if it went through the area, if it hit it hard. It depends on how big the Spanish flu section of the cemetery is, but there's, especially around this area, there's always a Spanish flu. You look at the dates and you're like, oh yeah, these are all Spanish flu victims. But another thing about in cemeteries, it brought to life things that used to be common practice that people not only forgot, but they forgot that they forgot. It's such a small, minor detail that, when people talk about, oh, what will our kids not know about that we know about, like dial phones and roll-up windows. But cemeteries used to be the place where you hung out, where you went to have picnics, where you took the kids to play. They were parks. And they were, if you look at some of the older cemeteries in larger cities, you will see that they were designed as parks. They were designed as arboretums. And one of the cool things, if you go to Aurora Cemetery in Aurora, Colorado, which is, butts right up next to Denver, it's a huge, huge cemetery. And if you go there, you will notice that almost no two trees are the same because it was designed as an arboretum. They designed the cemetery so that people who study plants and stuff can come there and study it. And they got trees from all over the world and shrubs, and it's just fantastic. And that's what cemeteries were like. They were designed as parks. They were made to be parks. Big truck passing me. But yeah, that's where you went. That's where you went to, like, have picnics and stuff. Another thing that's forgotten about cemeteries is that a lot of lodges, like you see the Moose Lodge and the Royal Order of Oddfellows and all these things. A lot of these lodges came about in the 1800s, going into the 1900s, early 1900s. A lot of these lodges, one of the benefits was when you paid your dues and you were a due-paying member, when you passed away, they would pay for your stone. Some would pay for your burial, some would buy the plot, but for the most part, they would buy your cemetery stone. And that's one of the things I do a lot when I'm in cemeteries is I document any symbol that I see on a stone. And if it's a symbol I've never seen before, I will research the heck out of it, And I've come across a lot of fraternal order of this and loyal order of that, and all these lodges and fraternities. And as you look them up and research them and Google them, you find out that was like 90% of the purpose of the fraternity was to have your stone paid for. And a good example of this is if you go into a cemetery, a lot of cemeteries have them, especially around here, you'll see a big stump. And, sometimes you'll see several of them, but they're about 6 feet tall. They look like a tree with the branches cut off and the top cut off. And you'll go on and it'll say, "Here lies a woodsman of the world." And it's so common that, and I'm kind of eccentric if you haven't figured that out yet, but when I go into a cemetery, I park my car, I get out, and I'll see one of those, and I'll actually say out loud, "Here lies a woodsman of the world." And it's something I do now. And this last cemetery I was in yesterday, again, I find something new and different. It had one of those, but there was a lot of stones that had the symbol on a regular tombstone. And I've seen the symbols on a regular tombstone before, but not to the extent in this cemetery. It was like all over the place. So it was like they ran out of cement or something. So they were just buying regular tombstones and stamping their stamp on it. But yeah, "Here lies the woodsman of the world." Loyal Order of the Oddfellows. And you'll see the chain, and of course the Masons and all. The Eastern Star. I've documented thousands of symbols in cemeteries. And going back to this Aurora Cemetery, there was a picture I took, and I wanted to go back and retake the pictures. It was one of the pictures I lost, and I loved the symbol that was on it. It was the symbol of a genie coming out of a lamp. And I'm walking around, and I just could not find it. It wasn't where I remember what it was. And walking around like that, that's what made me start thinking about, well, what if I had to find a stone, like a specific stone, and I couldn't leave till I found it? How would I go about doing that? What pattern would I walk? I just walked this row of stones, and I don't think I looked at every single one of them, because if my eye wanders, you look around. So how would you do that? And that kind of evolved into, well, what if these were doors? What if you had to find a door? And my first idea for the story was the doors were going to be passages to other places. Like you could open a door and go to China, open a door and go to South America. But of course it was like a fantasy story, so you'd be going to the fantasy worlds. You could go to the world of the elves, the world of the gnomes. And I thought the city, and I had it envisioned as the city of Crescent. would be the city that like a big subway hub, like a Grand Central Station, and everybody was coming through to go to their places or coming from their places and arriving. But again, that didn't make a lot of sense to me, because why are all these people coming to this one location? I would have to come up with an idea or a reason why people would want to visit this place. And so then I thought, well, what if these were storage units? When you drive into a town, you see storage units. And then I started to create the history of it. There were bigger storage units. The hill itself was impenetrable, and no one knew why it was impenetrable. But you could put the storage unit there, and if you closed the door to the storage unit, you were basically creating an impenetrable storage unit. So, first the rich, the kings and queens came there, and then you had people coming and putting their doors in between the big fancy doors. And like I said in the story, you even got little doors the size of matchbooks, for races of fairies and gnomes and, the smaller races. And they came in and they put their doors where they could. So you can just picture this big hill just covered with all kinds of ornate doors, stone, wood, big, small, triangular, rectangular, zigzag, just all different sizes and shapes of doors. And people know that whatever they put in there and close the door, that it's safe. It's perfectly safe. And then I started, and of course I'm a writer and I'm a daydreamer, so I started thinking, what kind of industry would build up around this? So you got the city of Crescent, and everyone in the city of Crescent is kind of, they're kind of geared towards helping the people that are coming to look at their storage units. Some people come from far away, and some people come from near. But that's the industry that built up around there. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to use magic, I'm just going to go all out with the magic. And you got every mythical creature you can think of, and every type of magic to cure hangovers, magic to make you smarter, and the magic that keeps peace in the town, that keeps the different races from fighting while they're there, because you're going to have races that hate each other. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to go with magic, this is going to be like all flat out. The hill alone is magical. And as I wrote the stories, I wanted to do it from a different viewpoint as well. So I've always liked reading, like Lord of the Rings and those kind of books. And there's always a point where they stop at an inn for the night, and then they leave the next day. So the innkeeper, all they know is that someone came in, they're on a big adventure, and then they're leaving the next day. So they don't really see the whole adventure. They're just seeing the hero for that night. And that's what the very first story was kind of like. It was the hero, the guy trying to save his wife, and just a slice of the adventure. You're just seeing a slice of that. And not only are you just seeing a slice of that, but you're dealing with an innkeeper who that's all he knows. That's all he knows is he sees slices. And that's why when the people come in, they're like, oh yeah, this guy's on this kind of adventure, and this guy's on this kind of adventure. We got to cater to this guy because he's on this kind of adventure. And I just wanted to come up with a whole bunch of different characters who are going through their slice. And I had to have a princess, and the guy that sleeps, I just love that character. I pictured a race of people that live in caves and all they do is sleep all the time. And so he's at the inn sleeping while he came to visit his door. And of course, in the story, a map is found, and no one could read the map, and they think it's a code at first. And then the map is found, and it's being followed through the city. And then, sorry, my phone started ringing in the middle of the video. So, he follows the map through the city, and that's kind of an important point in the book is how to follow the map through the city. And he gets to where he's going, and he's using magic to make himself smarter. And he finds the source of magic for the hill, and when it's done and he walks away, it fades from memory. And there's a couple stories I've read and a couple stories I've written myself where, somebody does something and they're not remembered for, or they don't remember doing it. I always felt that was kind of an emotional, like a sad thing to do. Like, if you're going on an adventure and you get done and you don't remember the adventure, that's a really sad thing. And so it's kind of a sad ending to the story, but he did write down, like, I verified I did all this, and he signs his name, and he's kind of proved that he did it, but then he doesn't remember that he did it. It's almost like, I don't want to compare it to being drunk, because I don't like drinking. I don't get drunk, and but yeah, it's like you wake up the next day and you don't remember what you did, and it's just kind of on the peripheral of your memory, like, oh, I remember I did something, but what was it? And then life goes on, and some people are like, oh, okay, yeah, that's really cool, he went on that adventure, but he doesn't remember it. I think that's kind of a sad, it's kind of a surreal ending for the story. And that's what brings it back around to Forrest Fenn. He went out and he did this, but he is getting on in age. And I remember when my dad was hitting 80, and I remember when my grandparents were hitting 80. You don't remember things the way sometimes that they happened. They say that every time you remember something, you're remembering the memory of that. And over the years, the longer you're holding on to a memory, the more it can change and fade and morph. And in the clip I saw with Toby, he played two Forrest Fenn interviews. In the first interview, they asked him, how would you know if the treasure's found? He said, well, I wouldn't. And he said, the only way you'd know is if the person who found it came forward and said they found it. And then in the other interview, which was like 8 years later, they asked him the same question. He says, well, I have ways of knowing, and I have secret ways of knowing, and I'll know if it's found. And he just seemed adamant that if it was found, he would know. And they seem to be like two completely different answers. And again, I don't believe one was fabricated and one's real. I think just something changed in the middle. And I'm sure he doesn't remember every interview he did over the course of 10 years. And so, they say the people who tell fibs are the people that have to have the best memory. But I think he was telling the truth. At first he was like, I have no way of knowing unless someone comes forward. But something changed in the middle, and I think maybe he went back and put something in the chest again. He said he went back twice, but sometimes I wonder if he went back, like, either the second time was years later, or he did go back a third time years later and did something to the chest to make it more legal, to make it more, I don't know, easier for the finder. Because there's just something that changed. He hit all this stuff and he was like, fine, because he thought he was, when he first hit it, he thought he was going to die. And, he's like, fine, have it. And then when he realized he wasn't going to die, and he realized that people weren't finding it, and it got bigger and bigger, and, it went from a few hundred to a few thousand to hundreds of thousands of people looking for it. I think he thought, well, you know what? I'm going to go back and modify what I did. So I don't think he'll ever admit to it, but I think he went back like a third time and put something in there, put documents in there, I keep hearing talk about a bracelet that he put in there that he wants back, and he's hoping the finder will bring it back to him, and that's how he'll know. But I just think it's very surreal. I think he's at that point of his life where he's remembering things the way he wants to remember them. I just, whenever I watch people pick apart interviews and just pick on every word, I'm like, and he acts so much like my dad. It's funny, especially when he's like, "Well, that was 2 questions," you know. And someone said, you know, "Can I ask a question? What word is key?" And he's like, "Oh, that's 2 questions. I'm not going to answer 2 questions." And I mean, that's just exactly the way my dad would act. And that's another point Toby made. He says, "You got to think like Forrest Fenn. You got to be Forrest Fenn." And that's what I'm seeing. And I just think something changed, and he went back and added something to the chest. But that is neither here nor there. We're still, everything comes back to the poem, and I think if you just had the poem, you could find it. But the hardest part is that first line, that first clue. Not the first line, but the first clue, where warm waters halt, is just so vague and so subjective. And I'm sure in Forrest Fenn's mind, he's like, this is so logical and so clear. Why can't people find this? And I've said this in like a dozen videos. He's thinking, why isn't anyone finding this? Because it's perfectly clear to him. And I don't think he's putting himself in the other people's shoes where, no, it's not perfectly clear. And I remember when I was doing my book, there was a point where I put it away for nearly a year. And then I picked it back up. And it kind of wasn't by choice, but it was finished. I put it away for a year, and I picked it back up, and I said, okay, I'm going to start from the beginning. I'm going to read the book, and I'm going to do each step of the solve and just look at it from the point of view of someone who, you know, doesn't. And I've actually changed a few things. Things I probably shouldn't have changed that were solvable, but I thought, I'm going to make this different, make it easier. Well, I don't know if I made it easier, but just so people know that it wasn't from my point of view. But, you know, there's a lot that goes into that. If he took 15 years to write this poem and he researched every noun, and I'm going to finish by just saying one thing. Now, I'm 58 years old, and he's 80. You know, there's like a 30-year difference, or I think he's 80. Someone said the video he was. But anyway, back in the day, and again, you youngsters probably don't remember this, there used to be a contest in the paper, and they printed like every week, where they would use nouns, and they would use a story with nouns, and you were supposed to change each noun to arrive at a different story. And or change each noun to arrive at a place where they wanted you to arrive. And it was kind of like a crossword puzzle. And it was a crossword puzzle without numbers in it, and then you had to find the noun and say, okay, this noun, if you change it to this other noun with an exact opposite meaning, you know, and they would tell you, like, you got to do opposites, or you got to do the same, and come up with a different story, or come up with a different conclusion just by changing all these nouns. And that's the very first thing I thought of, because I remember doing those, and I remember, like, changing all the nouns and making sure, you know, because you could use, it was all the same words, you just changed the nouns and you changed the meaning of this little paragraph. And they did it, they presented it different ways, like crosswords and blanks and drop downs. But yeah, that's what I was thinking of, like, maybe he did those same puzzles, and he knows that he researched every noun, and because he wanted to find nouns that fit, I don't know, not opposite means. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want you to do the opposite of what's in the poem, but just if you find another noun that means the same thing, you can rewrite the poem with these different nouns and come up with something different. And again, he said, no, don't change the poem. So I think in his mind, he already changed it. He already did this. And so, I don't know. It was something that popped into my head. Like, when I revisited all this, I thought, you know what? As soon as I heard that he like looked up all the nouns, that was the first thing I thought was, that's just like that puzzle that was in the paper. And I'm going to have to go back and see if I can find some of those. They're just really old, you know. I don't even know how you would find old newspaper puzzles, but just to see how they did them in the paper, just to see. I I mean, they were in a lot of papers. I imagine at some point he saw that, but I don't know. That's just me musing. And remember, like, I've had to say this in other videos. I'm just musing here, and I'm not stating facts. And I might have gotten words wrong in interviews and words wrong from YouTubers. But this is just what I'm thinking. This is just my train of thought. Plus, I'm going on like 2 days of no sleep, and I've driven. Let me tell you how far I've driven. Come on, it's a rental car. I've driven 1,292 miles, so I've driven quite a few miles in the last day or two. But I love driving. I want to drive to a place where I think it's funny when you have a solve. It's like you fall into a rut and you can't get out. And I have a solve, and it fits elegantly, and it fits up to the first 2 or 3 clues. And then, of course, I think that's where you got to have boots on the ground to find the rest of it. But again, the first 2 or 3 clues are so vague and subjective, and I don't know. It could be anywhere. And so I'm going to revisit I got to move again tomorrow. This whole trip, put a damper in my move. I should have been done by now, but I got to go back and do a couple of really good loads, and I'll be done. So I don't know when I'll be able to sit down and look at the poem again, but that's what I'm going to look at. I'm going to maybe take the poem and highlight the nouns and just... I already did that to some extent. I looked up a lot of the words, and that's where I came to the conclusion where my solve was. Because I've looked up some of the words and it fit this area it fitted even better when you looked up the nouns, and that's what made it click in my head. So anyway, I've mused enough, and I've probably confused a lot of you, and I am absolutely certain I've given away a clue to my book, and if you go back and watch the videos, you'll pick up on it. But it's getting colder, and I'm thinking all this rain and snow is going to start turning to ice. I should probably pay attention to my driving. But you all have a good night, and it's something to think about. And, I'm going to try and make it home.